Welcome to the Dance for Life Conference 2013.
Our keynote speaker is an Ivy League professor and author, a former U.S. ambassador, business owner, venture capitalist, philanthropist, and most importantly, a proud father of four. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Honorable Gregory W. Slayton.
Gregory 史雷顿，哈佛商学院毕业，曾任职于顶尖的顾问公司，以及担任数间公司的 CEO， 甚至登上华尔街日报及时代杂志，任教于许多大学，更曾获得白宫钦点成为外交官，而且还有一个美满的家庭，不管是哪一方面，都是人人称羡。不过现在这个成功人士脱下其他的光环，以身为4个孩子的爸爸为荣。史雷顿自己童年的经历，以及成为爸爸后遇到的各种难题，点滴经验累积成书出版，要教导现代社会忙于工作的男人们如何当个好爸爸。观众朋友你好，我是金玉，欢迎收看真情部落格。今天的来宾呢，他真的是大有来头了，因为他曾经是美国《时代》杂志封面故事的成员之一，他也是美国很多家大型公司的 CEO， 他也曾经被美国白宫钦点为驻外的大使。不过他最想要跟各位分享的，却是他最自豪，也是他认为最重要，他自己也最在乎的一个身份，就是如何成为一个好的爸爸。我们欢迎 Gregory。Welcome to Taiwan.
Yes, thank you so much, Amanda. 非常高兴在台湾.
Wow, you can speak Chinese.
Oh, just 一点中文. But I'm working hard on it. I really want to be able to speak Chinese.
So do you want to say something to our audience first in Chinese?
耶稣爱中文人. The Lord loves Chinese people. That I'm sure of. I know that.
Actually, I have read your book, which gives wonderful guidance on how to be a better father. And in the book, you mentioned a deep connection with China since you were very little.
Yes.
What's your family like?
Well, unfortunately, my American family had some real problems. And my dad, he had some real bad problems and eventually abandoned my brothers and myself. He drank too much and had some other things. And that was obviously very, very sad to have him say to my brothers and myself that he didn't want to have anything to do with us. And for 25 years, we never heard from him. So it was very sad. And then he died. But the blessing was that we had a Chinese family just down the street, Chinese-American family. And Ken Chang was my best friend in the whole world. And their family kind of took me in and loved me and gave me my first Bible and really, really helped me to become a Christian.
Did you ever try to find your dad or try to make contact with him?
Yes, my brothers tried a lot. I didn't try so much.
Why?
Because, well, you know, honestly, sometimes, I mean, it was a very bad situation. Let me just tell you a positive story. The first few days that I was in with my Chinese family, I thought to myself, boy, I wish I were Chinese. Because the dad's not drunk, he's not throwing things at mom, he's not screaming at me, you know, he's not doing these crazy things, right? So, but my brothers did try to get in touch with him, and he you know, wanted nothing to do with his family, which is strange, but unfortunate.
Do you still remember the last contact with him?
I do. The last contact with my father was quite sad. I had become a Christian, and I was in Africa working with World Vision International, kind of as a missionary helping poor people in Africa. And I contracted acute viral hepatitis and almost died, very close to death. I was airlifted back to New York Hospital, very, very close to death. And a few times they thought I was going to die. Obviously, I didn't die, thank the Lord. And then one day the nurse came in and said, Mr. Slayton, there's a call from your father. Now, I hadn't heard from my dad in a long, long time. And I said, really? I said, wow, okay. And I took the phone, of course, and I said, Dad. And he said, yeah, you know. And we spoke for about maybe 90 seconds. And then he said, I'll never forget, he said, Greg, something's come up, I gotta go. I'll call you right back. And he just hung up the phone. And that was the last I ever heard from my dad.
Oh, really?
The last, yeah. And then, 20 years later, my brother got a message through another lawyer that my father had died in another part of the country. And it was so sad. But I don't want to dwell on that because, my family, we weren't poor. I always had food to eat and clothes to wear. And, and through this whole thing, I became a believer. And that's the most important thing ever.
Did you feel very hurt while you were young?
Of course. This is the thing, all children need a dad.
Right.
Of course, the mom is critical. The mom is super, super important. But there's a reason that God made the mother and the father, And I think all children need the dad for different reasons. When a girl is adolescent, she needs the dad to show her what it is to be respected and treated properly, right, by men, right? And the boys need a dad to show them this is the way. This is how to be a man, right? Because what you see in America now with the breakdown of the family, so many kids are going into gangs, which are really substitute families, right? And they're learning how to be men in a very, very wrong way, right? About killing and having kids out of wedlock, and it's a disaster.
How did you learn to deal with the bitterness inside of you?
Well, the whole thing for me has been really drawing closer to Tianfu, and really understanding that I have a heavenly Father. Maybe King David says in the Psalms, he said, even if my mother and my father abandon me, still the Lord will lift me up. And that's really the story of my life. I've had these incredible opportunities, U.S. ambassador, Silicon Valley venture capitalist, Ivy League professor. That's all the Lord, it's been wonderful. And I've got a great wife and 4 wonderful kids, and that's just been God's great and deep blessing.
Did you ever try to figure out why the Chinese family is so different from your own family?
Yes, absolutely. I was always thinking about that. In the first few days, as I mentioned, I thought, I wish I were Chinese.
Right.
But then, because it was so different than my family, but then after a while, I realized it was because they were a Christian family. Now, part of it, of course, was the Chinese tradition of close families, and that's very important. But what really made the difference was that they were a Christian family, very strong Christian family. And that made all the difference.
Did they spread the gospel to you?
Definitely. They gave me my first Bible. I never had a Bible before. They gave me my first Bible. And my brother, Ken, very close friend, still today, he's the godfather of our children. He said, when I said, Ken, this Bible is, nobody reads the Bible anymore. Nobody believes the Bible, because that's what my family had thought. And Ken wisely said, well, Gregory, have you ever read it? You can't criticize it if you've never read it. Of course, I had to tell him, no, I've never read it. So I said, well, why don't you read it, and then we'll have a talk about it. So I read in the New Testament, and I was reading about this guy, Jesus. I thought, wow, this is amazing. This is incredible. And then God started to speak to me through the Word, and then little by little, finally then I was baptized.
And what was the turning point for you to make up your mind to believe in Jesus?
This was key turning point. My Chinese brother and I hitchhiked across America. Crazy thing to do. Don't anybody ever do that in the studio. It's crazy. But back then it was still crazy, but not that crazy. And every night we would be out in the open plains of America, and we'd have these long philosophical discussions. And he would argue the Christian perspective on life, and I would argue the secular perspective. I was an Ivy League guy. I was pretty smart. I felt, pretty good about this. But I'd realize at the end of the conversation, and they were wonderful conversations. In college, this is what you do. You just have these long arguments and discussions. And every time I realized that if you just made this one assumption that Jesus Christ is who he says he is in the Bible, then Ken's worldview, the Christian worldview, is very strong, very cohesive, and very positive. Whereas my worldview This is the old worldview, the secular worldview. There was nothing. I mean, I knew enough philosophy to know that if there's no God, there's no reason for anything. Right? And so one night after another one of these long, great discussions, I couldn't go to sleep. Ken lay down in the tent and went to sleep. And I just couldn't get to sleep. So I got out of the tent. I walked over to the lake. We were the only people for miles. There's nobody else around. And I looked up at the moon. I'll never forget this. We were in Wyoming. And I said, God, if you're there, please, please show me what you want me to do. Mm-hmm. Because if Ken's right, then I really got to find you. know? Mm-hmm. And then immediately, I mean, things started to happen. Ma Shong.
Really?
That the Lord
what
really.
happened?
Well, for instance, I was back at Dartmouth College, which is my college, Ivy League school in mm-hmm. New England, and the second day I was there, the captain of the football team invited me to a Bible study. Oh, just like out of the blue, just out of the blue. Uh-huh. And of course, because he's the captain of the football team, because there were a lot of cute girls at the Bible study, I said, sure, I'll go. But through that Bible study, I remembered about reading the Bible before when the Changs had given it to me, and I was like, wow, this is really good. And then little by little, you know how it is, the Lord's working in my heart. I did study other religions. I looked, very deeply at
like
Buddhism, like Buddhism, like Islam, like Hinduism. I wanted to look at everything, but more and more, and there's something to learn from each one, but more and more, I really just saw, maybe Ken's right. Maybe Jesus really is alive. Mm-hmm. And then finally, I said, yeah, I think Jesus is alive, and I think he loves me. And most importantly, I think he really did die for me, for my sins, to make me part of his family.
Mm-hmm. In what way has God changed you?
The truth is that statistically, most boys grow up to be like their fathers. Mm-mm. Even if you don't like your father, even if you say, I'm not going to be like my father, but the truth is most guys do grow up to be somewhat like their dad. And by God's help, so far, thank the Lord, one thing, for example, my wife and I have been married, this year will be 25 years.
Wow, okay.
And we have 4 beautiful, wonderful kids. Fortunately, they all look like her. So this is good. That's very good. Oh, by the way, I have the perfect Chinese family. I have 1 daughter and 3个儿子. So we have a perfect Chinese family. It's just great. And the kids are doing really well, Ivy League students and all this stuff. And in my family, on both sides of the family, for 3 generations, everybody's been divorced. So just the fact that we're still married, which my wife's a very strong Christian girl, is a wonderful thing. And the Lord keeps working in my heart and her heart, and there's plenty of more work to do, but God loves you. That's what I really want people to know out there. Whether you're Megoren or Jonggoren, it doesn't matter. That the Lord still loves you, and he wants to know you as his son or his daughter. Not some distant, like Buddhism, like how can you really know God? I mean, there's a lot of interesting stuff in Buddhism, but you can't actually know God as your father. There's no way. Same in Islam. You can't know God as your father. Christianity, you can know God as your real Tianfu. That's amazing. And for me, that's the whole thing.
Then has God made you to forgive your physical father?
Yes, definitely. Now that's hard. I would be lying to you if I said, oh yeah, no problem, I forgave my father, easy. Because it's hard. I mean, but I think that in the Lord's Prayer, when we pray, Father, forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. The Lord really wants us to learn how to forgive. And that's important, because bitterness is like swallowing poison and waiting for the other guy to die. It doesn't affect the other guy, it just affects you, right? So that's why I think the Lord wants us to get rid of the bitterness of hatred and anger and, those things. It just doesn't help. I think job number 1 is being a father. It does mean making sure that you have time with your family, that when you're home, you're really home. You're not checking your BlackBerry or your, iPhone. And every one of us dads can improve in these areas. Welcome to the Be a Better Dad Today website. You know, this site was built by dads and for
经常在网络上分享当个好爸爸的小撇步，以及四处演讲教学。史雷顿深知父亲从家里缺席带来的影响，进而想做一个好爸爸。第一个获益者当然就是他自己的家庭。每天在精英群里打滚，甚至是举家被外派到异国生活，他都不忘家庭，也享受到家人们的全力支持。
At the beginning of your marriage, weren't you worried about that you will follow in your parents' footsteps?
Of course. Absolutely. I was very worried that I would follow in my American father's footsteps. And that's why I was taking notes. I lived all over the world.
Take notes?
And I'm taking notes. I made a notebook for myself about good fathers and bad fathers.
Good father. Oh, really?
And bad fathers. Mm-hmm. And for me, it was important because I wanted to learn how to be a good dad. And also, to be honest, I saw behaviors amongst unsuccessful dads that were similar. And I really realized, okay, better not do that.
When you had the baby, what kind of a father did you think you'd turn out to be?
Well, I didn't really know. Our daughter was born first. She's the oldest. She is Sasha. And, I think dads have a special relationship with their little girls, if you're really lucky, if you're blessed, right? But let me say, if you make an effort. Fatherhood, some guys think, I can't be a good father. Not true. Every man can learn to be a good father, but you have to make an effort. If you're not there, if you're off, not spending any time with your children and your family, that's a problem. Mm-hmm. But if you just make an effort, you can be a good dad.
I know that at that time you were kept very busy.
Yes.
So how did you manage to take care of your work and family at the same time?
Well, I won't tell you that I always made the right decisions. I graduated from Harvard Business School. My wife and I were married at Harvard. And then I went to work for McKinsey & Company, which is a wonderful management consulting firm. But we had to work crazy hours. Mm-hmm. And finally, I had to make a decision. And was I going to continue to work those crazy hours and not spend much time with my family? Or was I going to take a different career path? And I decided to take a different career path. Because, and this is something I really challenge guys in the book directly, what's the most important job you have? Mm-hmm. You got to think about that. Is it your job? I don't think so. I think job number one is being a father. Now that doesn't mean that you quit your job and you spend all your time at home. Obviously not. We can't do that. But it does mean making sure that you have time with your family, that when you're home, you're really home. You're not checking your BlackBerry or your, iPhone. And every one of us dads can improve in these areas.
Mm-hmm. You have 4 kids, right?
Correct.
And 4 kids with different characteristics, right?
Very different. Same mom, same dad. We tried to raise them the same. Very different kids.
Mm-hmm. So how did you share your love to each different one?
Well, I think you share your love in different ways at different times. And different children understand love differently, right? And sometimes we guys are not so good at communication. Guys are usually action-oriented, like let's get it done, which is good. That's a good thing. Nothing wrong with that. But sometimes our wives and our children need us to be more about relationship, more about listening, right? And ting dong, right? Just making sure I'm listening and I'm understanding. Not just ting bu dong because I'm doing something else, reading the newspaper or something else. Something else that's very important is that children need a physical affection, right? When children are young, when they're babies, they need dad to throw them up in the air and hug them and stuff. There's a lot of scientific research about the benefits children get from physical affirmation. That's also true when children are adolescents, right? Now it's a little bit different, of course. You're not throwing your 13-year-old up in the air. But, for instance, daughters. Let me talk about daughters. Daughters need physical affirmation from their dads. And if they don't get it, they are very likely to look for physical affirmation in other ways, maybe from other, teenage boys, right? Which is a problem. So you want to be sure to give your daughter, the appropriate kind of hug and pat on the head and just, stuff like that. So, and I'm still learning. I want to say right off the bat that I am not an expert. I'm still learning. There's a lot to learn. In fact, in the book, I really talk about fatherhood being a journey. And it's a journey of forever, but it's a great journey. It's the most exciting journey that we can ever be on. And it's the biggest blessing that you can have. To have a happy family is a great blessing.
Hard to believe in your book, you mentioned once you were fired. What happened to you?
Yes. The point is, in Silicon Valley, there's a lot of stuff. I mean, companies go up, companies go down, right? Things happen. And yes, I was fired from a company. I didn't feel, I was the president. I didn't feel it was the right decision, but it happened. And the company ended up. It was a good solution because what happened is the competitor to that company hired me like a week later. And that competitor, the company that I went to be the president of, actually sold to Silicon Graphics for a lot of money. And the company that had fired me 18 months later went out of business. So in a way, I felt, well, the Lord had vindicated me, And
what did your family react during that week?
See, that's the important thing. The important thing isn't about firing. I just want the audience to know that, hard things happen to everyone. Hard things happen, job changes, someone gets sick, a family member has an accident. Hard things happen to everyone. But if your family stays together, they can provide the stability and the joy and the ground, the strong, solid ground with the Lord that we need. So when I came home that night, of course I had already called my tai-tai and I had said, bad news, horrible. But the kids, they didn't care at all. They didn't, they're like, who cares? It's still my dad. They come, daddy, daddy, daddy. And they were young, so they'd give me a big hug and stuff. I mean, what a beautiful thing, And that was great because, of course, I was thinking, this is the end of the world. This is a total disaster. But, that helped me give perspective that it's not the end of the world. And that, of course, we prayed about it as a family and, and it turned, as I say, the competitor hired me a couple weeks later and we ended up doing much better. So the Lord had a plan,
Right. Afterwards, how did you get the chance to become an ambassador?
That was God's grace. I was in Silicon Valley and I knew President Bush Sr. just a little bit, just Eden, and I hosted a lunch for him. This was when Bill Clinton was president, so President Bush Sr. had already retired. He came out to Silicon Valley. I hosted a lunch for him. It was really very good lunch. I have a lot of friends in Silicon Valley. It was a wonderful lunch. And then about 2 weeks later, I got a handwritten note. President Bush Sr. is a real gentleman, old school gentleman. And he'd written a handwritten note, Gregory, it was wonderful to meet you. Thank you for the lunch you hosted for me. I'd like to introduce you to my son, the governor of Texas, Governor George Bush. Please look for a letter from him coming to you shortly. I thought, that's great. Okay, good. I'd love to meet, Governor Bush. He was a Harvard Business School guy just like me, a very strong Christian. About a week later, I got a letter from Governor Bush inviting me to join him for lunch in Austin. This is before he had started running for president. And it was through that we got to know each other quite well and developed a very strong, he became a good, very good, pangyo. And he asked me if I would be interested in being a U.S. ambassador. And of course I said, yeah, absolutely, sir. Yes.
And what were your family react to the information, to the invitation?
Well, everybody loved Bermuda. I mean, Bermuda is one of the most beautiful places in the whole world. Yeah. So to be the U.S. Chief of Mission in Bermuda was unbelievable.
Whoa.
Yeah. I actually had the chance to be the U.S. Ambassador to Singapore.
Oh,
which
wow.
was my number one choice. I would have loved to be to Singapore. But my wife's mother was very ill. She had cancer at the time. And so, of course, Singapore to New Jersey, where my mother-in-law was,
distance,
it's forever, right? And Bermuda to New Jersey is 90 minutes. So we thought, okay, well, and Bermuda's beautiful also. Beautiful island, very wealthy island also.
Wow, I've
So
never been there.
We told, well, you have to come, you have to visit, Yeah.
Did your family go with you?
Of course, always.
The whole family?
The whole family, yeah. That's always, almost always, ambassadors' families come with them. Now, most ambassadors are much older than I am. So maybe maybe it's just a tai-tai and no children. But for me, our children were all still young. So all 4 children and my wife and I went to Bermuda, and we lived there for 4 years. I served President Bush for 3 years, and I served in the Obama administration for almost 1 year.
Wow, acting as an ambassador is very different from your previous jobs, right? What did you do?
Well, I was a Silicon Valley venture capitalist before, and before that I was with McKinsey & Company, and I'd been a CEO. I've been CEO of a few different companies. And in some ways, yes, it is very different, but in other ways, it's not different at all. Because, guanxi? Guanxi is not just important in China. It's important all over the world. And there's a diplomatic saying that I took to heart, and I think it's a good one for all of us to remember. Make your friends before you need them. Make your friends before you need them. So I worked very hard to establish good relationships in Bermuda, in Washington, wherever. And that was one of the reasons that the Obama administration allowed me to continue my service. You might not realize, but in America, when a new president takes over, the old president's ambassadors all gone. And in Bush, that was also true, all gone, except for me and I think one other person, some very small number of people. But I had developed some very good relationships with some Democrats, and they said, "Hey, Slayton, I know he's a Republican, but he's actually doing a good job. Let's hold him. Let's keep him in Bermuda." So that was a great honor.
Were the kids adapted to the new environment?
Bermuda is like it's like Disneyland for the kids.
Really?
I mean, it was not hard to attend Disneyland. Yeah, it was because it's so beautiful, and it's clean, and it's it's a small island. There's less than 100,000 people in Bermuda. So, and of course, if you're the U.S. ambassador, the U.S. chief of mission, everybody knows who you are. Everybody knows who your children are. So the kids made a lot of friends, and it was a wonderful 4 years.
So I heard that you've completed your first book there.
Yes. Thank you for knowing that. Yeah, I appreciate that. Our first book was something that my wife and I did. It was a book on U.S.-Bermuda relations. Because in 2009, Bermuda celebrated its 400th anniversary. Now, I know that's nothing compared to China, but in the West, 400 years, that's a long time. And we decided to do a book in honor of Bermuda's 400th anniversary, celebrating the long friendship between Bermuda and America. The book became a big bestseller, and we gave 100% of the royalties to local charities right there in Bermuda. It turned out to be a lot of money. And likewise, I should also mention that this book on Hao Baba we're giving 100% of the royalties here in Taiwan. Every book that's sold in Taiwan, all the royalties are going to go back to Christian charities here in Taiwan. Same in China. The book's being published in China, which is pretty exciting. Same everywhere around the world. So we're just thankful to have that opportunity. What do you think the Lord might do with this book? And funny enough, I hadn't really thought about that in a deep way. And I thought about it for a minute, and just an answer came out that my wife and I never, I said, sweetie, I hope that this book is successful in the United States. But I really think I'm writing this book for China.
史雷顿现在可以算是个畅销作家，他的书指点了许多爸爸们生活平衡的方法及技巧， 更帮助了背后无数的家庭。他说，圣经的智慧指明了方向，天父的爱则提供了燃料。
The fatherhood journey is a lifelong journey, and none of us are ever going to be perfect fathers, and that's okay.
而2011年好爸爸团契基金会正式运作后，史雷顿的好爸爸运动越发活跃，他更将脚步跨到了华人世界，期待这些华人爸爸们一起来做个好爸爸。
Let's talk about your second book, your new mission. It took you 3 years to finish the book, quite a long time, huh?
It's hard to write a good book. Maybe it's not hard to write a bad book. I don't know, but I really wanted this to be super helpful for dads. All dads. You don't have to be a Christian dad. You just have to want to be a better dad. And one of the reasons I wrote this, Amanda, is because when I became a father myself, I was looking around for a book like this, and I just couldn't find one. A kind of a instruction manual. You know, this is a men's book for men. This isn't a book designed for ladies. This is about action items and, you know, next steps and take charge and you know. And the hope and the prayer is that by God's grace, a man reading this book will become not only a better father, but a better husband and a better man.
During these 3 years, were there moments that you feel that you hit the wall?
Definitely. I had worked maybe for 6 months or 8 months on the book, and it was coming along, but I realized that if I was going to make it a real book, I was going to have to work a lot more, you know, another 2 years. And so I was in Washington. We were living in Bermuda, but I had to be in Washington, D.C. that day for meetings with my boss, Condoleezza Rice, the Secretary of State. And that morning at the hotel, for whatever reason, I just started to pray really very deeply about the book. And I just said, Tianfu, just show me, please, if I should write this book or not. Because I don't have extra time. If the book is not going anywhere, then just forget about it. I'll just leave it alone. And within 3 hours, a buddy of mine from Silicon Valley calls me out of the blue and says, Gregory, how you doing? You know? And, you know, Zema Young, and we're talking back and forth. I said, Gregory, the reason I called is about that fatherhood book you're working on. I'm like, what? What? And he said, yeah. There's a book agent, a very good book agent, who's a dear friend of mine from Southern California. He's in Washington today. I want you to have lunch with him. Boom. That gentleman, Bill Dallas, and I had lunch. He became my agent. He was the one that helped me to put the book together, to sell it to a very good publishing company. And let me tell you, I never forgot that, because that was the prayer and the answer. Like, okay, Lord. I'll tell you one more thing about China.
Okay.
About the book. So 2 years later, I'm almost done with the book. And, you know, working so hard. I mean, I just working hard. And late at night, my wife says to me, Gregory, what do you really hope that this book will accomplish?
Wow.
No, in a good way.
What a question, right?
It's a good question, right? Good question. What do you really think that the book will accomplish? What do you think the Lord might do with this book? And you know, funny enough, I hadn't really thought about that in a deep way. And I thought about it for a minute, and just an answer came out that my wife and I never, I said, you know, sweetie, I hope that this book is successful in the United States, but I really think I'm writing this book for China. Now, I'd never said that before. I'd never even thought about it before, but that was the true answer from my heart. And my wife, who is very prophetic, she thought about that. She listened, she said, she thought about it for a minute. You know, she said, Gregory, that's right. That is the right answer.
Wow.
I was like, wow.
That was her answer?
Exactly.
Why?
Amazing. Because she's prophetic. She felt the Lord's hand. Now, we didn't know what that meant. We didn't even know maybe the book was going to be a flop in the United States, right? Because most books sell less than 5,000 copies and everybody forgets about them, right? Well, today, if you look at today, the book's been out for 1.5 years. It's sold almost 100,000 copies in the United States, which for a Christian book is a big number. And Commonwealth Press, wonderful publishers here in Taiwan. It's being published all over the world. But the places we really care about are Taiwan, Hong Kong, Singapore, and Zhengguo. Yeah. It's exciting. Let me put it like that.
And what did your kids respond to this book?
My kids were wonderful about it. Now, first of all, I told them that I would not use any of their personal stories, right? Only I would use good stories, right? I would use the good stories, but the bad stories I would disguise, and I would make like somebody else's family, you know? And there's a lot of stories in the book. I think stories are very important, you know, to understand. It's one thing to just tell what to do, but it's another thing to really get a story about either something that worked really well or something that didn't work so well. My kids, my older kids, they did want to read the book before it went to press. And they were wonderful about it. They said, okay, Dad, you know, Hung Hao, this is a good book. We should go with that. My little boy, my little 12-year-old, Nicky, sometimes when I make a mistake, which happens a lot, I must say, still today, he'll say to me, hey, Dad, be a better dad today. So he'll remind me, he'll kind of joke with me about, Daddy, better be a better dad today. So, you know, when I get mad or I lose my temper or something like that, you know.
Obviously, you want to do more because after you finished writing the book, what made you to establish Fellowship of Father Foundation?
Well, Fellowship of Fathers Foundation is a U.S. charity. We are working through the charity to strengthen at-risk fathers in the United States and at-risk families in the United States. And it's also through that charity that we're working here with our partners in Taiwan, again, the Trinity Holistic Association and Taiwanese churches. We're very excited about the opportunity to work with great partners here in Taiwan to strengthen fathers and strengthen families.
What are the primary goals of this Fellowship Father Foundation?
Well, the primary goals are threefold. First of all, to honor God in all we do. Okay. Second of all, to help strengthen fathers, because the truth is, if you strengthen fathers, help guys to be better fathers, better husbands, then the third goal is very accomplishable, and that's to see stronger families. Because the breakdown of the family in the United States, it's not that mothers are walking away from the families. I mean, sometimes that happens, but that's very, very small. Usually it's that the father walks away from the family, you know. And so if you can strengthen the fatherhood bond, you can strengthen the family, and that's what we're trying to do.
Just as you mentioned about, you help a lot fathers who serve in the military.
Correct.
Or who are put in jail.
Yes.
Can you share some stories with us?
Sure. I mean, my own father had been a U.S. naval officer. And then when he came back from the Navy, that's when he really started to have problems, because it's hard to be in the military and then come back to civilian life. So we worked through the U.S. Military Chaplains Corps, the Army, Air Force, Navy, and Marines. Each one of those branches of our military have a chaplains. And the chaplains are like pastors for the military men and women. What we do is we provide fatherhood resources for the chaplains in each of the branches of the armed service, so that when they have a soldier or a sailor maybe really struggling with family issues, they can give them some fatherhood resources, pray with them, get them involved in what we call a fatherhood fellowship, which is really a men's Bible study, and really give them some more support, which is what they need.
And what's your plan for you to use Fellowship of Father Foundation to help fathers to become a better father in Taiwan?
Well, you know, we never do anything by ourselves. We always, our strategy, you know, I'm an old Harvard Business School McKinsey guy, so we talk about strategy, but our strategy is very simple. We look for open doors that the Lord has opened, and we look for partners, right? If there's an open door but no partner, maybe not, you know, because there's a lot of open doors all over the place. So for us, open doors and partners in the area of our vision. For us, it's all about China, Greater China, right? For my wife, myself. I mean, the book is all over the world now, but I'm not spending time in India or Africa or Europe, whatever. God bless that. That's fantastic, but that's not the vision that God has given us. The vision the Lord has given us is for China. And so in Taiwan, last year, a year ago, we had no plans for Taiwan. Not that Taiwan's not important, it's super important, but you can't do everything. And the Lord had given us some great partners in China. And then I met a wonderful brother by the name of Bernard Lee, a Taiwanese gentleman, very successful businessman, great guy. And we met in Beijing, actually. We were talking and had a wonderful time and just met again. And he said, Gregory, why don't you think about doing this in Taiwan? I'm like, I would love to do this in Taiwan, but, we need partners and whatever. And then Bernard's my partner. And now we're working, not just him, but his association and churches. In fact, I flew in from Beijing Monday night, and I went down to Tainan, and I spoke to a wonderful group of about 200 pastors down there on fatherhood and family and encouraging them. And we're putting together a fairly exciting plan to reach out not just to the church. See, this is the beauty of fatherhood, family, and faith. Maybe 10% of Taiwan may be Christian, something like that. Something along those lines.
About that number, right.
So you're talking about at least 20 million people who are not Christians, right? Of those 20 million people, many of them have never been to church, and some of them not that interested in going to church, right? But every single one of them, wants to have a better family. Every single one. Right. Better family, stronger family, happier family, more successful family, right? And that's the idea here, that of getting via mass market, via television, and secular TV, secular internet, social media, etc., getting the message out about family first Taiwan, and then we're putting together a whole plan of equipping the churches. That's the key. About 5,000 churches in Taiwan, equipping the churches to meet the needs of their local community. Not just people within the church. That's good, of course. The brothers and sisters within the church want to have them very strong, very happy families. But what about Wang Shenshong, who just lives down the street and he's having real problems with his son? And then he hears Jeremy Lin talking about the family first movement, and you need to get involved, and then he goes on the internet and he sees, right in my town, there's a church offering a family first seminar. It's free. I'm gonna go. And then he goes and he discovers three things. He discovers, one, he can be a better dad, and he gets encouragement, he gets the tools he needs. He gets help, right? Two, he discovers, there's a church here. I've never been to church before. This is pretty cool. This is nice. Some nice people. The Musha is a very well-spoken guy. Maybe I'll come back, And if he comes back, hopefully, eventually, he discovers that he has a heavenly Father who loves him very much.
So is that why you think it is still very important to have men's Bible study?
In America, we have an expression: strong men, strong church. Weak men, weak church. No men, no church.
Right.
And it's not that it's not that the sisters aren't important. Jiame. Did I get it right? Jiame. There we go. Extremely important. Obviously, sisters are the foundation of the church in many ways. Jesus, when his resurrection, he announced first to the sisters, not to the brothers. It's kind of interesting there. But you got to have strong men to have a strong church. You just do. And sometimes we have, unfortunately, I think in the West, we've kind of feminized the church a little bit. And nothing wrong with that, but Jesus was a strong guy. And you look at the men of the Bible and what they did, and those are strong guys, Paul and Daniel and David. And we need to help men know that if you really want to be a strong man, the strongest man is the man that kneels before the Heavenly Father, because then you get his strength. And that's real strength.
It's a great honor for me to have an interview here today with you.
Linda.
And do you still have anything else to share with our audience?
John chapter 3, verse 8. And I feel it's very much true for good TV and for your listeners. And the verse is that the Spirit of God, Jesus talking to Nicodemus, said the Spirit of God is like the wind. It blows wherever it wishes and accomplishes the Lord's will, basically. And I just feel that the Spirit of God has been blowing in Asia for a while now. But I really strongly believe that it's going to be blowing even in a much stronger way.
每个人都很想要一个幸福的家庭。我相信在Gregory 的理论当中，要有一个幸福的家庭，有一个很重要的人物，就是要有一个好父亲。其实世界上没有一个工作比当父亲来的更重要，而且它是一个一辈子的工作，是一个一辈子的责任。但是每一个爸爸都是在当了爸爸的时候才开始学习如何当爸爸。当然，在这个过程当中，他不是全然没有痛苦，他仍旧是充满着挑战，但是他也是充满着爱、快乐、智慧与勇气的一个过程。也希望每一个男人都可以成为最棒的爸爸、最体贴的老公、最有智慧的男人。Thank you, Gregory.
Yes,
Thank you.
Amanda. 上帝祝福你。
各位好，我是你们的老朋友孙越。这位好爸爸，我们怎么能知道史雷顿他过去是这样子？但是在成长中间，你看到，无论他怎么样，后面我们发现神的爱，借着一个中国家庭对他的关心，借着朋友他的好朋友那个肯张帮助他。他进了教会，他信了耶稣，因此一路在改变。在电视机前面的你，我们今天看到了这样的情形，我们会做什么想法？我相信电视机前面有很多的男士，你也希望成为一个好爸爸，有的时候不太容易做得到。我们在人前我们要面子，我们不太愿意把自己的压力告诉人家，我们不太愿意什么生活，我们的行为是不能够告诉人家的。我们一起低头做一个祷告。亲爱的主耶稣，我们谢谢你，我们借着我们这位弟兄施雷顿他自己的见证，我们在这里为电视机前面的朋友们祷告。亲爱的主，我不是不想，我立志为善，但是我做不到，我行出来的时候仍然做不到。主啊，求你帮助我们，修正我们，让我们在耶稣基督里，我们成为另外的一个人，一个完全改变的人，一个脱离过去的那种阴影，让我们能够坦荡荡的在众人的面前，在家庭的面前，能够成为一个美好的人。主，我们做不到，唯有我们依靠你，我们才能做得到。我恭敬的为电视机前面一些希望成为一个好男人的好爸爸的，为他们祷告，为这些家庭祷告。唯有耶稣基督是这个家庭的主，这个家才能够完全的有和乐，有健康，有平安，有很多很多美好的事情发生。我恭敬的为他们祷告，奉主耶稣基督的名，阿门。朋友，我们不是不想，有的时候我们真的做不到，但是神能够改变我们，他不要让我们经历下一辈子我们怎么样，我们怎么样。在你家的附近，或者是在你的朋友亲戚曾经跟你提过的教会，请你走进去，勇敢地走进去。主耶稣接纳你，他的爱帮助我们，改变我们，让我们在很多的事情上，从前无以自拔的事情，在耶稣基督里完全都能改变。因为耶稣爱我们，耶稣不只爱我们，耶稣爱我们自己的家人，爱我们的过去生活，爱我们的仇敌。亲爱的朋友，记住了，耶稣爱你， 耶稣爱你的家。上帝赐福你。